with my phone because I have a good camera coming in the mail. We'll see. Anyway, this is my sculpture studio. Let's take a look at a few things. I make sculptures in clay, and these are just two examples of some recent sculptures I made. These are bisqueware, which is clay, pottery clay, that's been fired once until it's about the hardness and consistency of brick. It's a little porous, and it's not quite stoneware, but it's called bisqueware. And anyway, just a couple cute little sculptures. I haven't decided what to do with them yet, but typically what I would eventually do to make these into something I would sell would be to cover them in silicone rubber to make a mold and then cast them in concrete. I don't know what I'm going to do with this guy. That's the top of his head right there. It goes on top, see? These are some of my molds. This is an example. Just an example of a mold. Just made of rubber, and I put concrete into it, and then make a concrete sculpture that I sell at farmers markets. These are a couple of molds that I put concrete into yesterday, and right now we'll just pop the sculptures out and take a look at how the concrete cast went. Pardon shaky cam for just a second while I put my phone camera into its holder here and then get to work. Okay. So I'm going to move this a little closer so we can see better. And it'll stop shaking. All right, here we go. Silicone rubber mold that I made originally by taking this sculpture and covering it with silicone rubber to make something kind of like a sock. And then it has an impression of the sculpture on the inside. Now let's just take it off of the concrete I put in yesterday. And you can see how when I put the concrete in, I don't just dump the concrete into the mold and flatten it off because it would be too heavy and ungainly. So I make it hollow. It requires a lot of technique that it's taken me about 6 or 7 years of trial and error to learn how to make the concrete behave. We'll be doing a little bit of that in about 5 or 10 minutes with another mold. Let's just take this out of here without tearing the mold. Hi-ya! Gotta pull hard but not tear the rubber. There we go. See? These are my banana gangsters. They're cooking up a caper. Casing the joint. Actually, I made this. I did the original clay sculpture for this when I was watching that old James Cagney gangster movie called Public Enemy. It's a lot of fun. So, two wise guys cooking up a caper. And this is just another, this one is popular, so I have to make a lot of, I make about 50 to 70 of these each year. And so I'm constantly casting these things. So the closest thing I get to mass production is to make 2 molds of the same sculpture, and then I can cast 2 of them in one day. But that's as close as I get to factory production, because this is sculpture for me is an antidote to A, working on computers, because it's tactile and spatial, and B, just business in general, where you form an LLC and you try to maximize production, maximize profit, hire people, engage economies of scale, and all that stuff. That's for big business. I want to be a handmade artisan who does everything himself. Let's see if I can make a living on that. And it's working a little bit so far. Here we go. Bananas. So now the next step will be to sand and smooth and grind. See all these rough edges? That's sharp as a knife right there. Then all these little imperfections. There are some little bubble holes that I will fill with just wood filler or plaster of Paris. No problem at all, these little things. So these are both pretty flawless, relatively, by my standards, relatively flawless casts. That's one thing I like about concrete, is that unlike resin casting, where one little bubble will just spoil your whole sculpture, and you have to use minute perfection casting resin. Concrete is a little more forgiving. There's a lot of sort of after, I guess you'd call it post-production, fixing and smoothing and re-sculpting that you can do. And a lot of it is grinding and sanding. Okay, so that's that. We got these two. I really do need to cast 2 more of these today. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Let's just start cleaning up. I'm going to clean up these molds. Clean up these 2 molds and get them ready for another casting. So I just scrape off the crust of concrete here. In sculpture casting, one of the main materials everyone uses is called mold release. Usually for fine resin casting, they usually have these silicone or lecithin sprays where you spray it on the inside and everything. But I found that for concrete, the best thing that works is just vegetable shortening. It's cheap and simple. So any kind of vegetable shortening, and with a chip brush, just dab a very light bit on the inside. And what this does is, part of it is to allow the concrete to pop out easily, but probably more importantly is it just over time, over the years, it will reduce wear and tear on the sculpture. I mean, on the rubber of the mold itself. So it'll be less likely to tear. The silicone rubber will be less likely to tear as I manhandle the finished sculpture out of here. So I'm just using Crisco, but it's all the same. Vegetable shortening. Any old brand is just the same. I've tried Pam cooking spray and it was okay, but it's a little too liquidy. Next thing we need, since this sculpture is a wall hanging, the next thing I need is this wire, and I use copper. It's called magnet wire, and it's just a copper wire. You can buy it in almost any thickness, And it has a very fine coating of ceramic insulation on it, which just adds more protection. But I would always use copper wire, never aluminum or stainless steel, if you want to make something weatherproof, because stainless steel and aluminum, no matter what anyone says, eventually they're going to rust and weaken. And copper, it only rusts in a molecularly thin layer on the surface of the wire. Copper will just almost never rust through and weaken. So copper wire, it's the best. This is 14 gauge. That's the thickness of this wire. I'm going to go get some. So 14 gauge magnet wire for almost all of my sculptures is what I use. For heavier ones, I use 12 gauge, which is thicker than 14 gauge. And for really big, heavy sculptures, I use 10 gauge, which is very thick, just stronger than you really need, but still pretty flexible. For really small sculptures, like that are just 1 or 2 ounces, I use 12 gauge magnet wire. Anything less than maybe a pound and a half, I would use 12 gauge. Okay, this is going to go in here like that. I will just embed this in the wet concrete. Also, when copper, it doesn't really rust, it just gets a patina on the surface. And even if this wire does rust inside the concrete, it's not going to expand the way steel does. So it won't crack. It won't, even on the very small chance that it rusts inside the concrete, it's not going to crack the concrete open the way steel will. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be making in the next 10 minutes or so. Hold on a second, let me put a message into YouTube here. Hi, comma. Welcome to my sculpture studio, period. Oopsie. Feel free to ask anything. And be sure to check out my finished work at there it is. Oops. Okay, that's for YouTube. I do simultaneous kind of live stream at YouTube. So hi YouTube and hi whatnot. We're gonna mix up some concrete now. Kind of chunky today. A little bit of moisture might have gotten into my bag of concrete. That's all right. Let's mix it all up. I use the back of the spoon to crush up the chunks. Smooth it out. I never really measure how much water I'm putting into the concrete because the fine distinctions in fluidity and consistency are just way too dependent on too many complicated variables. So I just look at the consistency. And I found that as human beings, we have our finest distinctions in consistency and texture are with foods. So I use food analogies as I try to judge whether the concrete is ready to put into the mold. And I just use some, foods you might know, like pea soup. The most fluid kind of stuff, kind of concrete state will be either vichyssoise or pea soup, depending on how gourmet you are. Then the next will be sort of a liquid shamrock shake. The next will be soft ice cream. Ice cream and freezing analogies really work well in understanding how the consistency and texture of the concrete changes as it solidifies. So I use soft ice cream when it begins to lose its slump. Then I use tempered Haagen-Dazs, like Haagen-Dazs after you mix it a little bit to soften it up. Then the next layer, the next stage of hardness will be hard Haagen-Dazs, like when you buy it at the store and it's pretty frozen solid, but it's still malleable. After that, we go into baking analogies with crumbly cake, like peach cob, like the like the crust of peach cobbler, or a soft cookie. After that, it's just too hard to work with. And the analogies break down. It's salt water. No, not salt water, but hard taffy after that, or hard butterscotch, and then sugar candy, like hard candy, and you can't work with it after that. So this is about, I would call this shamrock shake consistency, which is just about ready to pour in here and shake it and get the concrete to flow over the surface of the mold so that we eliminate bubbles. That's the goal at this stage. I want the concrete body to flow over the inside surface of the mold because I found that's the best way to eliminate voids and bubbles that result in unsightly pockmarks on the surface of the mold. You can add tiny bits of water using a spray bottle just to keep it, just to modulate the fluidity. And I use a chip brush, not pressing too hard on the surface of the mold, but just getting the concrete to flow over those details, the eyes and the nose and the mouth, to make sure they all come out really well in the finished sculpture. Just thinking about flow right now, flow over the surface of the mold. In some types of concrete casting or maybe resin casting, they use vibration, like even a machine that will vibrate the thing. But I don't like to do that too much with concrete because I do it by slapping it a little bit. But if you do that too much with concrete, what happens is the concrete doesn't mix. The hard, heavier quartz aggregate inside the concrete body will settle to the bottom, and you'll get a grainy, weak surface of your sculpture. Usually the tips in my sculptures, the tips of the noses get grainy and sandy when I do that, when I do it too much. A little bit's okay. Okay, I'm going to add a little here, and then I'm going to save a little handful of concrete that I want to get hard, about like clay, so it's workable like clay is, and I'm going to use that later on. Right now I want this to get about like soft ice cream, and I want this to get about as hard as clay, like workable clay, Play-Doh. So as you work, you just sort of keep in mind the state of each little chunk of concrete, each little handful of concrete that you're working with, and keep mixing if you need to soften it up. Add a little water if you really need to make it softer, and just do trial and error. It takes a while to learn how concrete behaves. Okay, you can see how this is about the consistency of soft ice cream. it's losing its slump. So now I can go like this and it won't fall unless I agitate it. It won't fall to the side. Yet it's still workable. A little softer than clay. So you gotta be really gentle. If I agitate it by shaking, it'll all just reliquefy and slump down like wet mud, like a mudslide. That's what we don't want. We want it to be soft and malleable, but to stay where I put it. To do that, you got to be really gentle at this point. Maybe you can see what I'm doing if I turn it gently. Okay, look at that, how that is staying where I'm putting it. And look at this. Watch what happens if I agitate it. Let's say I really need it to stay exactly there, but I shake it too much, and watch what happens. It reliquefies, just like the ground under building does during an earthquake. That's why I'm being slow and gentle here. And I feel it firming up, kind of like a little harder than soft ice cream now. It's getting to be like tempered Haagen-Dazs, which is still okay. At this point, if it gets too hard and I'm still pushing it around, then you got another problem. It starts to, the clay body starts to adhere to itself, and it can pull away. If you push it and pull it too much, it can yank it away from the surface of the mold, and you get not bubbles, but voids in the surface of the sculpture. So that's just something to, that's just a limiting factor that is the reason why you can't, that you can't work it too much as it gets too hard. But this is just perfect right now. It's like firm, soft ice cream, put it that way. Okay. This is probably getting pretty solid. No, that's still good. Kind of like firm, soft ice cream here too, so we're all right. Just hanging wire in there. Now, as it gets fairly firm, you can use the back of a spoon to really smooth out the surface without agitating it. And that just means I'll have a nice smooth surface on the back of my sculpture, so it'll be easier to sign with a pencil later on, but also I'll have less sanding and grinding work to do. Now let's position the wire just right for hanging. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, now this is starting to, this concrete here is starting to be about a clay-like consistency, like workable. So I'm going to just start working with it. And I'm just going to make a little plinth to hold this wire in place. And when concrete hardens up, it'll be a good solid anchor for the hanging wire. I'm just taking a little bit like that. By squeezing the clay like that, I can make it sort of reliquefy it just in this local little area here where I need it to be soft for a second while I position the wire. For that same reason, I might jiggle the wire just a little bit to reposition it. Okay, now I want to resist the temptation to mess with that for another 3 or 4 minutes until it gets to the hardness, about the flexibility and hardness of soft leather. And meanwhile, I'll just kind of keep an eye on this little bit of clay here. I mean, a little bit of concrete, clay-like concrete here. And I'm going to use this as it firms up to create a little ridge, a structural ridge around the bottom of the sculpture, just for, because it has a good quality feel to it when you have a ridge like that. So I'm going to set this concrete aside. I'll work with this in about 5 minutes. And that'll give me time just to wash off these tools and come back and work on it. This guy will entertain you for 90 seconds. I'll be right back. Hi, Hick Life. How's it going? These are my concrete sculptures. And right now, I've just cast my banana sculpture, and I'm putting a structural ridge down on the back side of this sculpture, all around the edge. Make sure the wire's in place. That looks about right. So I just run a little bead of fairly firm wet concrete around the edge and smooth it off, just as you see. And it provides a little bit of a ridge there. You can see it slumping down. Just lifting it up like this agitates it enough that it slumps down a little bit. See the angle there? So maybe I'll wait for it to firm up a little before I pull it up like this and smooth it off. Hey, Hick Life. I've been working with concrete for, oh, 7 or 8 years, but it's really only in the last 3 or 4 years that my trial and error efforts have reached kind of a critical mass to where I feel confident. And actually, I have to say, every single day that I cast something, I feel like I, I finally got it. You know what I mean? And I was even, what can I say? It's like you're always learning something new about how the material behaves. And so, um, for example, I used to just dump the concrete into the mold and flatten off the back. And I had really heavy sculptures, but they looked okay. But then when I started selling them in person, yeah, these are silicon rubber molds. Silicon rubber. I make them off of my own concrete, I mean my own clay sculptures. So yeah, it's just stretchy hobby rubber that you can buy it. You can buy it on Amazon. I use a brand called Smooth On, but a lot of different brands will work pretty well. I've tried saving money by using um, silicon rubber caulking from Home Depot. Just the kind that smells really bad, and you buy it in a caulking gun and squirt it out. And you can make it work, but after you make the mold shrinks a lot, and the whole shape of your sculpture will change. It's also, it tears more easily, not because the rubber itself, the caulking rubber itself, is lower grade so much as that inside the caulking tube, it the silicon rubber has chunks that don't adhere to each other, and so you end up with seams, invisible seams running through your mold that, as you stretch it to take it off of the sculpture, after several times, it's going to tear more easily than this more expensive stuff that um, is used in hobbies. So I use two-part silicone rubber that you mix it together in kind of a syrupy state, and you paint it onto your sculpture and then put on a few more layers till you have about a third to a quarter of an inch, third to a half of an inch thickness. Yeah, you can make them work. Um, you can make it work, and it's a lot cheaper, but it's, in the long run, it's not worth it. So I spend a lot. I just buy whatever expensive stuff there is. I buy it for my molds, because if you're going to use them for 10 years and several hundred castings, it's worth it. So I use this brand called Smooth On, and they have a line of different different kinds of rubber called dragon skin, and it's all this color. It's kind of a translucent white, and that is, sometimes it comes in handy while you're making the mold. But they have a lot of different types of rubber. They're almost all the same stuff, but just um, different speeds at which they solidify and cure. Some, they harden up in 4 minutes, and you can't even work with them. They're just like boom, solid rubber. Others, they take 16 hours before they solidify, and it's almost too much time. And they're syrupy, and they slide off and run off your sculpture and run down the table and onto the floor before they solidify. Well, it is. I live in Portland, Oregon, so it shouldn't be a nice day, but it is today. I don't want to jinx it by saying spring is here. No way. It's going to get cold again at least once before the spring comes. Okay, I'm going to do another sculpture here. I think I'll just take this. Well, this is such a small amount. I think I'll take this and make a refrigerator magnet out of it. So I've got this mold here for a larger sculpture that's a bunch of grapes, and it has a lot of little faces like this. And sometimes this can be a good refrigerator magnet if I glue a strong magnet onto the back of it and then paint it and polish it. It's pretty popular. I think I'll make this guy's face today. He's not amused at all. That's this one. This is a paintbrush with a little bit of Crisco vegetable shortening on it. Press it in there. Get the concrete to flow over the surface a little bit to remove bubbles. Watch it reliquefy and slump down. Put it in a little more. Take a wet brush. Just pat it a little bit. This is all just to make sure it doesn't have bubbles between the concrete and the surface of the mold. Well, I sand these almost like you would, just like a woodworker. If it was wood, I would be doing the same kind of sanding, just sanding off the rough edges of the raw concrete. I do very light, fine sanding on the surface of the concrete, but not very much, just to make sure that it doesn't have rough spots that I don't want there. Then I lacquer it and paint it and lacquer it again, and then polish it with buffing wax. Pretty much like woodworkers would do. Okay, now that's done. I'm going to let it sit. So this is one I cast yesterday, a partial cast of a sun face, and it'll just be a cute little wall hanging. And you can see there's rough edges here. These all need to be ground. I use a die grinder usually. And then sandpaper. And that's a mold. That's one of my molds. I've been using this mold for about 6 years. I say this is concrete because just in popular language, colloquially, concrete means cement, sidewalk cement, basically. But contractors and specialists tell me that in the professional jargon, concrete means cement that has gravel in it, like gravel aggregate. And the only aggregate in this stuff is fine sand. So technically this is mortar. And I use Rapid Set brand. I don't like to mess around with mixing my own because I use such small amounts that the cost doesn't, I wouldn't save that much money by trying to formulate my own concrete. So I just use a commercially available rapid set brand, all-purpose construction material. It's called Cement All. Sometimes it's in a blue label. The rapid set brand, yeah. Also, for liability purposes, people will be building stairs and, yeah, grout. It's a grout, actually. It would be a mortar if it were slightly softer than brick and used to glue bricks together. But a commercially available concrete will have been tested. They will have spent millions of dollars testing their formula, you know, for strength and consistency and all that. So I don't want to mess around with, I don't want to have any mystery or artistry in the actual material that I use. I want it predictable. I do enough trial and error. I waste enough time with trial and error, just learning my own method of casting. But I don't want to do trial and error with formulating my concrete. Although I have to say, pure white Portland cement is really fun to experiment with because it can be beautiful. You can make it look like Carrara marble if you mix it properly and you play around with like some pure white Portland cement alone, and then some pure white Portland cement that you put black ink or brown sepia ink into, and you mix them together a little bit. You can get all kinds of amazing effects. But that's only if you want to spend time messing around with materials and, you know, experimenting with materials. Yeah, this is about, I would never go more fluid than this. I almost put too much water in here, but for this sculpture, strength isn't so much an issue because it doesn't have very many fine appendages and fine detail that you need ultimate concrete strength for. So I'm gonna use this. This is what I call vichyssoise or pea soup. It's very fluid, but it's good enough. Another main problem with any more water than this, and I would start to get a lot of bubbles, like almost a foaminess that creates pits in the surface of the sculpture. But this is all right. This is going to solidify enough. And it'll be really easy to make it flow over the surface of the mold. So let's just dump it in there and get going. Yeah, another drawback this might have is it might take a long time for it to, I might have to sit here for a long time waiting for it to solidify enough to work with. Okay, I'm just getting rid of bubbles on the surface. Bubbles that would show up on the surface of the sculpture. There will be a few, but this will minimize them. See, this makes the concrete flow over the surface of the mold. That's more effective. To me, that's more effective than jiggling or vibrating it, which works, but it makes all the heavy quartz aggregates settle to the bottom. So I have a grainy surface. but shaking it like this instead of vibrating it like this kind of remixes the concrete in very localized small areas of, so it keeps it consistent over the surface of the sculpture. That's very fluid. Okay, there. Now that's still very liquidy and slumpy, so I'm gonna have to wait before I can smooth it up onto the sides of the mold and make it stay. So it's gonna have to sit there for 5 minutes. Meanwhile, I'll just set this aside and wait for it to get to a clay-like consistency that is easy to work with. And that'll give me time to clean off my tools. Okay, I'm just going to let everything sit for about 5 minutes. This guy will entertain you until I get back. Okay, let's take a look and just see if this is solid enough to work with yet. Yeah. Oh, that's good. It's like soft ice cream, just right. So I'm going to push it up and make good contact and get a nice structural layer against all the sides of the mold. Perfect. Can you see that? See what I'm doing here? I just want good coverage and a smooth back to the sculpture if I can manage it right now. If not, I can do it later or grind it after it hardens up. But so it's not a top priority. Smoothing is not a top priority yet, but it will be later. Okay. There. That's a nice wall. Okay, so that concrete that was so soupy before is now just the perfect soft ice cream consistency for working with. I put the wire in, position it as high as I can above the center of gravity, but low enough that it won't bump into this point when you hang it on a hook on the wall or something like that. And a little, I call it a plinth, but a chunk of concrete just to hold the wire against onto the wall of the inner wall of the sculpture, so it'll be strong. That's what I'm making right now, just to cover up the wire and hold it strong to the side of the sculpture. And this is definitely stronger than it needs to be. I have a strong wire and a strong concrete plinth here. For heavier sculptures, you have to be more careful about the strength, but with this one, it doesn't weigh more than 2 pounds, so it's really no problem. Okay, it's just about right. Yeah, it's not going to bump into this point. Okay, now I want that concrete that I just put in there to lose all of its slump, and so that as I inevitably agitate the concrete by when I add the little rim around the bottom, the wire won't just fall down. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for this newly applied concrete to lose its slump and become as close to leather hard as I can. Meanwhile, this concrete that I'm about to use to strengthen up the inside rim of this, the back rim of this sculpture, is still fluid enough that it's not going to harden up on me too much to work with. It'll be kind of like a clay-like consistency that I need. And I can tell I have too much here, so I can start using some of it just to make more refrigerator magnets. So I'm going to hold this up. I'm going to hold this up so that I don't agitate the concrete down there and just make another magnet here or two. This one is slumping down. Let me give it some more concrete there. Okay. Still have too much. I can do a little magnet out of this thing. Okay, that's a little firmer. So now I'm going to make a little edge around the bottom here. It's slumping down, see that? Got to wait a little bit more. I'm trying and failing to resist the temptation to mess with it, and I'm just kind of making it worse. Okay, gotta let it sit. I'll clean my tools again. Okay, while we wait for this one and this to solidify a little bit, I'm going to take this other one that I cast about 10 minutes ago. Oh, hi Hicklife. I add that rim around. I'll show you in just a second. I add it just because, see, if this comes to a sharp edge, it just doesn't feel like it doesn't have a quality feel. I still haven't, this is all rough. I haven't ground this and smoothed it yet, but on the finished sculpture, it just gives it a nice quality feel to have this, a little bit of thickness around the edge here instead of a sharp pointy. Also, if this is a sharp, if this wall comes to a sharp pointy zero thickness, when I sand or grind, sometimes you get little a little serrated edge there that doesn't look good. And here's a finished one. This is a little bit more of a finished sculpture, and see, it's got this edge around here, which I try to keep uniform. Got a little thin around here because this is a partial cast that I sell for a lower price. So it's got a lot of imperfections, but you can get the idea. This is pretty firm and easy to work with because I cast it about 10-15 minutes ago. So I'm just going to smooth off a little bit of the rough edges that I see back here, which will save me a lot of time and trouble with sandpaper later on, and a die grinder. A lot of noisy, dusty work that has to be done smoothing the backs of these off. So the more I can smooth now, the easier life will be tomorrow when I have to grind these. As long as I don't ruin it. Put plastic over it to keep it damp overnight. That's to cure the concrete, and that's going to do it. Now this might now be ready for a little bit more work here. Let's see. Sort of. I'm getting impatient, so I'm just going to go for it. I can only stand around here so long. You know, also what's happening is in the summer, all this happens a lot faster. And in the winter, there's a lot more standing around waiting for the concrete to solidify because it's colder. My finger, you can't see it, but my fingers are freezing. It's like I can't feel anything in my fingertips. Well, thanks, Hick Life. Yeah, it's all just trial and error, you know. I made a lot of junk, threw a lot of things in the trash. But isn't this better than working on a data file for your 3D printer? I mean, I'd much rather um, be doing this than typing on a keyboard and clicking on a mouse for hours on end. In a way, I'm kind of glad that AI took away my actual career, because uh, I might not have had the courage to, on my own, to just go and decide to become a professional artist. Uh, when you're, I'm a dad with a mortgage. I can't like mess around. Can't just be bohemian unless I'm forced. Mm, this concrete is very slumpy and sticky, and I'm kind of I'm kind of working too early. I'm impatiently working with this concrete before it really solidifies to an ideal consistency. But you know, I'm impatient. I don't care. What the heck? Let's just go. And it's not a disaster. It'll just be a little more work. This particular sculpture will take a little more work to grind and sand and smooth on the back, but it'll be just as good when I get done with it as a perfect one. So I feel like this, it's a little sloppy, but structurally and aesthetically, the end product is going to be just as good. It's just going to take more work when I grind it, but that's all right, because I want to go in and just have a cup of coffee, frankly. So anyway, if there are no last minute questions, I'm gonna go wash my hands. Do I'm gonna do something with this, then wash my hands, and during the 90 seconds that it takes me to do that, if any questions pop up, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I'll just turn off the video when I get back. So maybe I'll do this. This will make a nice little refrigerator magnet, I think. Okay. I'll be back in 90 seconds, and that'll be it. All right. Well, thanks for showing up. This has been uh, my sculpture work for today, for this afternoon. There's some more things around the studio. My moon lady. These are more finished. Actually, all these bananas are the same sculpture we've just been casting. It's pretty popular, so I have to make a lot of them. These are all raw concrete, waiting for me to paint and polish them. And on the back of this panel, I think I have, this is all my finished stuff that I take to my farmers markets. I keep it in bins. This is a bunch of finished ones. Okay, thanks a lot. See you later.